Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your source material and really try to unearth the most fascinating insights just for you.
Exactly. We're aiming to cut through all the noise and pull out what's genuinely surprising, maybe even significant, from everything you give us.
And today, we are plunging into Habiganj. It's a district tucked away in northeastern Bangladesh.
Hmm.
And we've got quite the stack of sources here, everything from, the usual government websites and Wikipedia, but also YouTube videos exploring spots.
Tourist spots, yeah, and landscapes.
Right, and even a glimpse of how Habiganj shows up on places like TikTok these days.
So our goal, basically, is to give you a really solid, well-informed picture of Habiganj. Its geography, which is pretty unique, its history, the culture there, and the key attractions, all pulled straight from this material.
Okay, then, let's unpack this. So starting with the basics, the lay of the land, Habiganj is part of the Sylhet division in Bangladesh.
Right. And one of the first things that really jumps out from the sources is how much water dominates the area. We're talking about a district, around 2,600 square kilometers?
Yeah, about that. And it is crisscrossed by rivers. I mean, the list is long. Kauai, Karangi, Sutang, Bijna, Ratnamonu, Dalai, Fanai, Barak, Kanthanala,
Yeah.
and the Kalni River. And that was interesting. It's formed where the Surma and Kushiara rivers meet up.
That's a key point. It really shows these rivers aren't just, lines on a map. They're absolutely central to life there.
Definitely. And geographically, it's got borders with several other Bangladeshi districts: Sunamganj, Molvi Bazar, Sylhet, Brahmanbaria, Kishoreganj.
Yeah.
But also, critically, it shares a southern border with India,
Hmm.
which are poor state.
That border location probably adds, well, another whole layer to its character, you'd think.
Yeah, I bet. Administratively, the sources say it became its own district relatively recently, 1984. Before that, it was actually a subdivision within Sylhet.
Right, going way back to 1874.
And it's classified as an A category district. So basically, a pretty significant administrative unit.
And if you dig into the structure a bit more, the sources break it down. There are 9 upazilas. You can think of those as sort of like sub-districts.
Okay.
And then 6 municipalities, 78 unions, and get this, over 2,000 villages.
2,000 villages. It's a densely packed area then.
Very much so. Population-wise, looking at the 2022 figures, it's around 2.4 million people calling Habiganj home.
And literacy is about 69% roughly.
Yeah, and the religious breakdown is predominantly Islam, just over 80%. Hindus make up the next largest group at about 16%.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. The unique facts buried in these sources.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
Did you see the bit about Bnei Ashon, one of those upazilas? It's apparently noted as Asia's largest village.
Wait, Asia's largest?
Yeah.
Seriously, that's huge. How do they define largest? Is it area, population?
Well, the sources don't spell out the exact criteria, for largest, but they mention it alongside its population over 300,000 people just in that one village.
Wow.
So you'd have to assume it's probably a combination of land area and just sheer number of people that gives it that title. It's clearly a major hub.
Incredible. And adding to that, Baniachong is also home to Bangladesh's second largest pond, Kamalaranir Sagardigi.
So a giant village and a giant pond. Quite the place.
Exactly. And one more unique geographical note that popped out, Ajmerganj Upazila. It's specifically called the capital of the Bati region.
Bati region. What does that mean?
So the sources suggest Bati refers to the lower-lying kind of flood-prone areas, particularly influenced by those big Hahor wetlands we'll probably talk more about. So Ajmerganj is like the heart of that really distinct watery landscape within Habiganj.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's step back a bit and look at the history, because that's where the name itself comes from, right?
Right. It connects back to the influence of a very important Sufi saint, Hazrat Shahillah. He's a major figure across the whole region.
And Syed Nasir Uddin-R, one of his followers, is apparently strongly linked to the Habiganj area specifically.
Exactly. And the name Habiganj, the sources trace it back to a market, a ghan. It was set up on the banks of the Kauai River by a man named Syed Habib Ullah. And he was actually a descendant of another historical figure, Syed Sultan. So it started as Habibganj, named after him.
And then just shortened over time, I guess.
Seems like it. And going back even further, there's actual archaeological evidence of really ancient human life here. Near the Chaklapunji tea garden, they found stuff like fossilized wood, basic tools.
Wow. So people have been there a very long time.
A very long time. The sources also touch on historical conflicts, battles that happened there, like between the Mughal army and the local Baropuyans.
Baroqueans, they were like powerful local landlords, right?
Exactly. Powerful regional figures. The sources even name some involved, like Anwar Khan from Sylhet and Hussein Khan from Baniachong, that huge village we mentioned.
Yeah.
And there's mention of a fort, too. The Pudajuri Fort, near a place called Jirapal, built by an Afghan king, Khaja Osman. Apparently, it was quite an important defensive spot. Shows the area had strategic value.
But maybe the most pivotal historical event highlighted is much more recent. It happened at the Teliapara Tea Garden, April 4th, 1971.
Right.
Right in the middle of the Liberation War.
Ah, yes, that meeting. Crucial. Senior army officers gathered there.
And this is where they essentially planned out the war effort. They assigned operational zones and formally organized the Mukti Bahini, the freedom fighters under General M.A.G. Osmani.
It was a foundational moment, really, solidifying the strategy for the whole liberation movement. And today, there's a memorial right there at the Telipala Tea Garden.
Commemorating that meeting. So history feels very present there.
Absolutely. And just looking at slightly older infrastructure, the sources mentioned the Habiganj Bazaar Shestaganj Bala railway line.
Oh, yeah.
Built way back in 1928 during the British era, though apparently service stopped on that specific line back in 2003.
Still, it shows that connection existed. And the old municipal office building in Habiganj town, that dates back to 1940. Another little piece of history standing there.
Yeah, echoes of the past.
Okay, now shifting gears a bit. Language and culture. There was something in the sources here that genuinely surprised me.
Oh, you mean the language difference? Yeah, that's pretty striking, isn't it?
It is. I mean, Habiganj is part of Greater Sylhet administratively, but the local language, the dialect spoken there, it's described as really different from standard Sylheti.
One source actually put a number on it, nearly 80% different.
80%. That seems massive. Why? How could it be so different being in the same division?
Well, the sources mostly chalk it up to geographical distance, maybe some historical isolation, different waves of influence over time, perhaps.
It basically implies that even though they're linked on the map, the everyday spoken language just evolved on its own track, making this distinct language tradition a really notable part of Habiganj's identity, almost like its own thing.
That's fascinating, how geography doesn't just shape the land, but the very words people use.
It really highlights how unique the cultural landscape is there. And the sources also point to how culture developed in the Highor areas, those vast wetlands we keep mentioning,
Right.
especially influenced by neighboring areas like Kishorgan and Netrokona.
And with river transport being so important back in the day, this area became a hotbed for traditional performances, like Jatra Palagan and Jarigan. What are those exactly?
Yeah, so Jatra Palagan is a kind of folk theater, often really vibrant, dramatizing myths or historical stories with music, dance.
Okay.
And Jarigan is more of a musical narrative form, telling stories, recounting events, often quite emotive, both deeply rooted in the local culture. And those watery Hayor areas connected by boats were perfect for spreading these kinds of performances around.
Makes sense. The sources list quite a few cultural organizations still active today, keeping these traditions and arts alive. Things like the Nazrul Academy, Keligar Ashur, Kowe Theater, Utishi Shilpagashti.
And a local branch of the Jakyo Rabindra Sinjit Samalan Parashad, too. So there's an active cultural scene.
And then there's that TikTok source, which gives us this really modern snapshot.
Right. People sharing, vibrant stories and visuals of Habiganj right now, using hashtags, getting comments.
It's like a living layer, showing how people today connect with and express pride in their home, mixing the old landscape with new tech.
Exactly. A blend of tradition and modern life.
Okay, let's dive into some specific places, spots that the sources really highlight as, places of interest.
Yeah, top of that list, I'd say, has to be Satchari National Park. It's in Chunorga, Upazila, set in the Raghunandan Hills.
And the sources basically describe it as a paradise for nature lovers, full of greenery, wildlife.
Established back in the 70s, actually, but officially became a national park in 2005. Covers about 243 hectares.
Home to different kinds of trees. Sal, garjan, mahogany are mentioned. And lots of animals. Around 200 bird species.
Yow.
0.6 types of amphibians, 24 mammal species. So monkeys, maybe civets, lots to potentially see.
And the name itself, Satchari, apparently means 7 streams or 7 waterfalls. Those are a big feature.
Right, and the park has walking trails, different lengths, a short 30-minute one, an hour loop, even a longer 3-hour trek.
One of those trails actually leads to a small indigenous village, Prepara, right inside the park boundaries. Gives you a little glimpse of local life.
Uh-huh.
And the longer trail, the 3-hour one, ends up in something called an agor forest.
An agor forest. What exactly is that?
So agor, or agar wood, it's this type of wood that produces a really dark, fragrant resin. It's valuable, used in incense and perfumes. So an agor forest is basically a stand of these trees, could be natural or planted. Seeing one there is pretty notable.
Interesting. The sources do recommend getting guides for the trails, which sounds sensible.
Yeah, and they give some practical advice too, like mobile network coverage is poor inside the park, be cautious, wildlife and terrain, and definitely plan to be out by evening.
And there are entry fees, plus fees for certain things, like a tea adventure, which I guess connects to the tea gardens nearby.
Must do. And speaking of tea gardens, we already mentioned Teliapara for its history.
Yeah, in the 1971 meeting.
But it's also highlighted just as a beautiful place itself, a kind of living memorial.
Then there's Kumlar near Sagadigi, back in Banaicham, that massive village, the second largest pond in Bangladesh.
And it's not just a pond, it comes with a whole legend attached.
Oh, a legend. Do tell.
Well, the story goes, this Raja Padmanabha dug the pond, but no water appeared. It stayed dry.
Uh-oh.
So his queen, Kamalabodhi, had a dream. The dream said the pond needed a sacrifice, and she offered herself. She walked into the dry pond bed, and miraculously, water just started gushing in.
Wow, that's quite a story. Tragic.
It is. Apparently, the poet Jasimuddin even wrote a famous poem about it, so it's really woven into the local folklore and history.
Banaichang also has some historical ruins mentioned, like the Banaichang Rajabari, a palace complex, founded by Raja Gobinda Singh, who later took the name Habib Ka.
And also the Maharatna Zamindar Bari, linked to the Maharatna family, who were prominent landowners. One of them, Gopal Krishna Maharatna, was involved in the Liberation War, too. So these places offer glimpses into that kind of princely landowning past.
Right. And shifting Upazilas again over in Habiganj, there's the Mazar, the shrine of Shatajuddin Qureshi.
Another important religious site, he was a companion of the main saint, Shashalal.
And there are legends around him, too, creating a water body with his staff, a miraculous stone.
Yeah, those kinds of stories often surround these figures. And interestingly, just like Shahjalal's Mazar up in Sylhet, his shrine here in Habiganj is said to have a pond with gazar fish in it.
Okay, hold on. Gazar fish again. And the sources also mention the Ajmeri Baba Dargah Sharif in Ajmer Ganj.
Right. Linked to Syed Ishaq Chishti, another Sufi saint, this one from Ajmer Sharif in India. The Upazil is even named after Ajmer.
And that shrine also has a pond with gazar fish. Okay, what's the deal with the gazar fish? Why are they specifically mentioned at these holy sites?
Yeah. Well, these sources basically tie their presence directly to the legends of the saints, especially Shahjalal and his companions. It's seen as kind of miraculous, almost a symbol of the saint's spiritual power or blessing connected to the water itself.
So their presence isn't just like biological happenstance.
Yeah.
It's deeply symbolic for local people.
Exactly. It's part of the reverence for these sites, a layer of meaning.
That makes a lot more sense. Thanks.
And of course, we have to talk more about those huge Haror areas, especially in Habiganj, Banaichang, and Ajmerganj.
These are the massive wetland zones.
That's right. Characterized by these enormous water bodies, especially during the monsoon, you see these really distinctive trees, corage trees, growing right along the riverbanks. They're adapted to the wet conditions. And often, the roads are built raised up, sort of like causeways through the wetlands. Sometimes they're the only dry connection for months.
It really sounds like life there is just completely dictated by the water cycle.
It absolutely is. Life revolves around rivers, around boats, transport, fishing, just getting around day to day. And the sources mention common sites like cattle grazing on the patches of land that aren't submerged.
Right.
One little practical detail shared was how tough it can be to find any shelter from the sun, from rain, when you're out on those exposed hail roads.
Yeah, I can imagine. Just wide open space. Highlights the challenging but probably beautiful environment.
For sure. And finally, kind of different but also significant, tucked away in Habiganj, is the Bibiana gas field.
Ah, yes. The sources noted its national importance. Supplied something like half of Bangladesh's total gas production.
Yeah, a major economic contributor rooted right there in Habiganj's geology.
So if you, our listener, were thinking about experiencing some of this firsthand, how do you actually get to Habiganj and move around once you're there? based on what the sources say?
Well, the most common route mentioned is taking a bus from Dhaka. Seems straightforward enough. You can get off at specific points like Teliapar Bishwa Road, that's near the Liberation War Memorial,
Okay.
or at Shastaganj, which seems like another key junction.
And then from there, it's local transport.
Pretty much. Mainly CNGs, those three-wheeler auto rickshaw taxis that are everywhere in the region.
Right.
You'd grab a CNG to get to places like Satchari National Park or to travel between the different upazilas. The sources even give a rough idea of bus fares and local CNG costs.
That's helpful. It makes practical sense. And what about navigating those really watery Habahor areas we talked about?
Well then it's all about boats. Absolutely essential. While CNGs work fine on the roads that exist, getting around the vast water bodies, reaching certain villages, especially during the wet season, it's got to be by boat.
Ties right back into that core geography again. Makes perfect sense.
It really does.
So wrapping this up, what does it all mean? When you pull together all these different threads, the history books, the maps, the YouTube videos, even the TikToks, you get this really rich, kind of complex picture of Habiganj.
Yeah, it's fundamentally a place defined by its water, isn't it? That incredible network of rivers and those huge, unique Hayward wetlands. That geography seems to have shaped almost everything.
From its ancient history right up to how people live today.
And its history is woven into these major regional threads, the Sufi traditions, playing such a direct, crucial role in the 1971 Liberation War.
Right. And culturally, it's got that surprising twist of having its own distinct local language, quite different from Sylheti next door. Plus, the traditional arts, and now these modern ways people are sharing their lives there.
It's a place where, ancient legends about magic ponds and saints kind of sit alongside someone sharing a video clip on their phone. It shows that continuity.
Heritage and present-day life, all mixed together. And amidst all that, you've got these specific natural treasures like Satchari and big economic engines like the Bibiana gas field.
It's a real mosaic.
Which brings us to maybe a final thought. Thinking about how isolated those Hayward areas can be, especially during the monsoon, and how distinct that local language is. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How does such a specific water-dominated geography forge such a strong, perhaps even somewhat insular local identity? An identity that seems to persist even now in our super-connected world.
That's a great question. Something for you to think about as you continue your own learning journey into this really fascinating corner of the world.